Welcome to Yoga Off the Mat. I'm your host, Divya. Today I'm going to give you an overview of the vast landscape that is yoga. And we'll go deeper into just one of those forms of yoga known as the eight-limbed path or Ashtanga yoga. If your experience of yoga has been primarily limited to vinyasa flows at a studio with maybe some breath work, quote unquote, peppered in there, this episode is about to blow your world wide open. So get comfortable, grab a cup of tea, and maybe a journal to take some notes. Let's dive right in. The word yoga is derived from the Sanskrit root word yuj, meaning to yoke or unify. But what are we unifying? Well, as explained by world-renowned yoga leader BKS Iyengar, yoga first attunes us to our jivatma, our individual humanly spirit. Through a series of disciplines, yoga unifies our jivatma with paramatma, or the greater spiritual energy of the universe. It essentially connects us to the source that we came from. And as a result of this unification, our soul is liberated from the limiting human experience through the process known as moksha. Now let's bring it back down to earth because there's a lot more to everything that I just said. So most people don't know this, but at a macro level, there are 4 different types of yoga. They can be practiced simultaneously, engaging different sides of who we are at our essence. First, there's Raja Yoga, also known as Ashtanga Yoga. This outlines the 8-limbed path that has been popularized in the West as a series of steps towards spiritual enlightenment. The word Raja means king and simply refers to the supreme energy that's reached at the end stage of this path. Ashtanga comes from the root word ashta, meaning 8, referring to the number of stages within this path. We'll refer to it as Raja Yoga moving forward and focus on this as the crux of today's episode. However, for context, here's a brief overview of the other 3 categories of yoga. Karma Yoga is the yoga of action. It teaches us how to control our ego and remain humble through selfless acts of service, known as seva, for the good of others. Next, Jnana Yoga is the yoga of the intellect and knowledge. We practice this through a pure dedication to learning, absorbing, and meditating on essential knowledge for spiritual inquiry and growth. And finally, Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of devotion. We embody Bhakti by first acknowledging there is a grand design to the universe and humbly surrendering to that power. It's most often practiced through the forms of prayer, chanting, and singing. You can think of these 4 paths as a way of expanding our consciousness and refining our ability to attune to the divine energy that surrounds us at any given time. Now let's dive into the 8-limbed path of Raja Yoga. I like to think of these limbs as a way of working towards enlightenment, starting from the outside and moving in. Meaning, we start with our presence and interactions with the external world, and each stage takes us deeper and deeper within ourselves. I'll just be giving you a brief outline for today because truly each limb could be its own episode, and it will be. The first limb is called Yama, or the ethics and morals that are to be observed in our interactions in the external world. There are 5 yamas in total, and the first one is the most well-known, ahimsa, meaning nonviolence. Ahimsa asks us to lead with peace, love, and compassion in our words, actions, and interactions. The second yama is satya, or truthfulness. Satya goes beyond only speaking honestly and to carrying ourselves with integrity and authenticity in all that we do. The third yama is asteya, or non-stealing. Asteya teaches us to not take what is not actually ours, in every sense of the meaning. The fourth yama is brahmacharya, or self-restraint. Now, this one's a little bit contentious because it has many meanings and many interpretations, but in essence, it asks us to practice self-discipline and keep control over our senses. The fifth and final yama is aparigraha, or non-hoarding. Here, we practice generosity in its truest sense by not defining ourselves by the things that we own. Moving on to the second limb. The second limb is called niyama. This one has to do with our internal disciplines. The first niyama is saucha, or purity. Practicing saucha is treating our body with respect and dignity by keeping it clean, hygienic, and well-nourished. It teaches us to show respect to our physical vessel so that we can show up as our best selves, both in the world and in our spiritual journey. The second niyama is santosha, meaning contentment. Santosha teaches us the importance of finding fulfillment through what we already have, rather than staying in a state of want. The third niyama is tapas, or the passions with which we wield our discipline in the body, the mind, and through our speech. And the fourth niyama is svadhyaya, or self-study. Here we learn to immerse ourselves in appreciating the beauty of the universe as we perceive it through our own lens. We become intimately acquainted with our inner workings as a way of understanding the world around us. The fifth and final niyama is Ishvara Pranidhana, or devotion. Ishvara Pranidhana asks us to decenter ourselves and surrender in genuine adoration of the spiritual energy of the universe. Moving on to the third limb. This one we all know and love. It is the beloved asana, or posture. Asana is the methodology by which we unify the mind, the body, and the soul. It's a moving meditation, a prayer in the form of posture, and a conduit of our concentration. Asana exemplifies how the care that we give our physical vessel is an essential step in our steps towards spiritual liberation. A sage named Tirumular from a region in South India called Tamil Nadu has said, "As I cherish my body, I lengthen my life." Really let that sink in. As I cherish my body, I lengthen my life. The fourth limb is pranayama, or the harnessing of our prana, the vital life force energy which animates us, through controlling our breath. Some call it the yoga of the lungs, and they're not far off. Pranayama helps us to utilize and expand the full capacity of our lungs, which increases our longevity and brings us into a more heightened alert state of awareness. The fifth limb is pratyahara, or the withdrawal of the senses. By gaining control over and subsequently releasing our sensory awareness, we bridge the gap towards the more internal disciplines of Ashtanga yoga. The sixth limb is dharana, meaning singular focus and concentration. This is the precedent that allows us to leave the noise of our mind behind, setting us on a clear path towards meditation, or the seventh limb of yoga called dhyana. Now, dharana is often conflated with dhyana because they are so similar in their outward appearance, classically presenting as a person seated perfectly still as they're immersed in their own world. However, dharana is actually the essential skill of concentration needed to achieve this state of dhyana or meditation. You can think of dhyana as a flow state. It's the total stilling of the mind and the absence of an intentional mental presence. The eighth and final limb of Ashtanga yoga is samadhi, or enlightenment. At this stage, you've tapped into an energetic realm that is beyond the confines of the human body, and your individual consciousness has unified with universal consciousness. The eight-limbed path of Raja Yoga is truly a process that allows you to begin exactly where you are. There is no prerequisite to walking this path. It's truly for anyone and everyone. It only asks that we begin with an open mind, a humble heart, and a desire to understand ourselves and the world on a deeper level. Through each of the 8 stages, we exercise a different skill that either lays dormant within us, waiting to be aroused, or we gather the building blocks along the way to spiritual enlightenment. This path is for anyone and everyone who seeks to live well and expand their consciousness. Regardless of your nationality, your religion, or your culture, whatever walk of life that you come from, you can benefit from this practice. I hope you now have a better understanding of the 8-limbed path of Raja Yoga. We'll definitely be diving deeper into these limbs in future podcast episodes. Here are some journal prompts to help you reflect on today's learnings. 1. What was my first introduction to yoga, and how did it shape my understanding of this practice? 2. How have I recently practiced one of the 5 yamas in my day-to-day life? And 3. Do I have any activities or hobbies that make me feel like I'm in a state of dhyana? Start here and see where the reflection takes you. If you enjoyed this episode and look forward to more, consider supporting my work on Patreon at Divya Bala. Make sure you follow Yoga Off the Mat on your podcast platform of choice, and you can find us on Instagram, Yoga Off the Mat Podcast, and on YouTube on my channel at Divya Bala. Thanks for listening. It's time to get off the mat and do some yoga.